the years have gone by, and with various bad things and good things that have happened, I think I suddenly felt I better start telling those stories. If you hear some noises, that's the cat who's thinking that I shouldn't be sitting here talking, I should be feeding her.
Greetings, Skullgateers. I'm Chris Vandyke, president of Skullgate Media and editor-in-chief of our flagship anthology series, Tales from the Queen. Welcome to Coffee at the Skullgate, an interview series where I sit down and talk with one of the writers whose work has appeared in our books. And today I'm talking to Jim Royce, who publishes as J.L. Royce. I'm really looking forward to this because Jim's story, Pray, Love, Remember, appeared in our weird fiction anthology, Loathsome Voyages, and he's the first author from that book that I've had a guest on this podcast. So I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about Jim. Jim, welcome to Coffee at the Skullgate.
Hi, thanks, Chris.
All right. So first, just introduce yourself. Who are you? Either inside writing, outside writing. Who is Jim Royce?
Well, I guess I'm a writer and also an engineer. Spent most of a career building medical devices and currently in medical imaging. But I've also had a long flirtation with writing. Started in high school as a teenager. Writing poetry, and I fell in with some evil sorts in science fiction fandom, and spent some years in fandom there as a teenager before I went off to MIT and lost all sense of a personal life. But so it's kind of interesting to be back and to start running into some of those people from long ago in science fiction fandom, who are still alive and out there writing and having fun. As far as writing goes, I've been writing poetry all along, but about 4 years ago, just got it into my head to start, to go back to fiction and start writing. My parents didn't believe in comic books, so I can't talk to you about comic books in any kind. But as soon as I was able to crawl to a public library, I found science fiction and started reading that in great quantity. So the earliest influences I think I had were people like Heinlein and Andre Norton, folks like DeCamp and Vance. And then, within a few years, it was Harlan Ellison and Roger Zelazny. I had the opportunity to meet some of these folks as part of science fiction fandom, and that was, of course, fun.
I love you said Zelazny. I feel that Zelazny his name doesn't come up as much as it should. He was actually one of my favorite authors back when I was a teenager. And I just feel I don't hear his name come up a lot, but when it does, it's with people who really like the genre. So.
Well, all these authors had different influences. Heinlein and the concept of a future history just captured my imagination. And I think it's influenced me that I often have interconnections between the stories I write, even though they seem improbable. Zelazny, very cinematic sort of author. He always had a kind of Hollywood glitz to his writing that appealed to me.
So the anthology that your fiction appeared in for us was Loathsome Voyages, which was mainly weird fiction. It sort of was, horror, sort of Lovecraftian. I know a lot of writers tend to only write horror. Do you normally write horror? Or is that just one of the things you sort of dabble in? Or would you even describe your work as horror? I know that we sort of like to blend those genre lines ourselves.
Yes. Based on the consensus of the horror venue editors who have rejected my work, I would say it's probably not horror. But I like to think that it's on a dimension of macabre. Mm-hmm. And that sort of cuts across genres. I mean, I can put that into romantic comedy. I can put that into, traditional horror, science fiction. So the piece in Loathsome Voyages, Pray, Love, Remember, is sort of a homage to Lovecraft, and it's written in his universe, although clearly not his depth of prose. But it's a time travel romance, which, as you might imagine, set in a Lovecraftian universe is going to end up badly for somebody, or probably everybody. I think what appealed to me about Lovecraft was he introduced this sense of science and mysticism or the occult or things beyond the realm of our science intersecting and not being exclusive, but actually, like, as in the witch house story, that this is a kind of a homage to. Um, you have a mathematician, which you'd think the most logical of people, faced with this logic that is beyond human logic. Yeah, I think Lovecraft appealed to me a lot, and that was another influence in that time.
So with the logic, like you said, you are an engineer. I know there's sort of a cliche that writers are all coming from the liberal arts. I know I was wondering, how does your sort of life as an engineer, does that influence the way you write? Does it influence the way you think of storytelling? Is there sort of a logic or science behind all the weirdness?
First of all, I appreciate when I read science fiction or horror, I appreciate verisimilitude in the underlying premises. If you're going to give me a faster than light drive, I want it to be something beyond, engage the FTL. I want to know, all right, why do you think this is going to work? As a trained engineer, I have a sense of you've got to get the numbers right, or this thing is going to blow up, and that might be a story in itself. But if it's just part of your universe, it should be realistic. So I've written, for example, a number of stories set on Titan, and it's what strikes me is I'm a total nerd because I enjoy this research immensely. Going and being able to convince myself, yeah, I can justify spending weeks reading about Titan and the latest missions and the atmosphere. And what is the specific gravity of the atmosphere? What's the pressure at the surface? And again, and what's the temperature and all this? And the same goes for history or reading about the occult or whatever. Whatever I'm going to embed in a story, I spend a lot of time researching.
Yeah, I think those are the details that a reader doesn't necessarily know, but you can sort of tell when they all fit together into a cohesive whole versus when someone's just pulling stuff.
Kind of winging it.
Yeah.
It's easy to kind of throw away logic and say, well, it's just assume this and we'll go with that. But sometimes when you impose the restrictions, the story gets more interesting. For example, I've written a number of slower than light universe stories. So what happens to human society if it does take you centuries to get from one end of human space to the other? Cryostasis, okay. So you can survive a trip that long, but everyone you left behind is dead. What's the economy going to work like? What is wealth going to mean? If I can just go and sleep for 100 years and my bank account has been growing all this time, assumptions are fine if you can justify them.
So it sounds like you've sort of only returned to sort of seriously, I'll use seriously in like sort of air quotes, writing prose in the last few years. What brought you back? Was there anything in particular that had you say, I'm going to write a story and then I'm going to try to publish it, as opposed to just, I don't know, dabbling or whatever you've been doing before that?
Yeah, before that, I had written a few things in fiction, not tried to publish or anything. Very early, I felt like I haven't lived and I don't know what I'm writing. I mean, I could write about spaceships or dragons or something, but that's just a part of a life that I haven't experienced enough to relate. The years have gone by, and with various bad things and good things that have happened, I think I suddenly felt I better start telling those stories. Time is now. So I bought my spiral-bound notebook, college ruled 90 sheet, and a box of black medium pens, and went to it.
Do you draft longhand?
I write everything longhand. This was another thing. I spent years trying to type away at stories, and when I decided to do this, I thought maybe I should use whatever part of the brain is involved when you move your hand around like this. And I did find it more creative to handwrite. It's also sort of Da Vincian because no one else tries to read it until I've gotten it edited into a first draft on a computer. I appreciate the physical sense of that's a page. I filled that. I've done my duty here. It's also very portable.
Yes.
Love Gene Wolfe. He's a Illinoisan, but I grew up in Illinois, so I can accept that. Amazing, creative person. Part of the inspiration that he offers me is just this variety. He'll be on a planet, he'll be in the past, he'll be dealing with people with disabilities, he'll be dealing with incredible vocabularies, which is something that I think is missing in a lot of modern English creative writing. So you ask what I'm reading now. For example, I'm reading Walker Percy's in Love in the Ruins, and that is both for the artistry of it and for the vocabulary expansion. You just read him, and every page I see a word that I haven't seen in a long time. Yeah, you can go back, mid 20th century or earlier, and of course find vocabulary that's out of use now. It was probably common at the time, 100 years ago or whatever, but then you have recent authors who just have a big vocabulary and they are able to use it. And it's a shame that things like Pro Writing Aid, they will shoot me here, promote this idea. Oh, this is good because a fifth grader can read it.
Like we were saying before, like constraints are good. It's good to not just, use semicolons in every single one of your sentences, but it's also adjectives are not evil. Adverbs are not evil. Sentence tags are not evil. It's a tool in your toolbox as a writer. And those sort of programs very much sort of try to just take all of those away and impose rules, because that's what computers do. They operate off rules, not.
I find them useful for to pass through the work that I can take pretty quickly. That'll find really dumb things like using the same word twice in the same sentence. An unusual word, not the or a or something. We'll find if I've fallen into lazy thing that I keep saying, or a phrase that I keep using or something. So it's good for that and for grammar, some grammar.
Yeah, it's when you find out you've used suddenly 16 times in a story and you're like, well,
can't have that. So we'll dial back suddenly a bit. Can we say something else here?
Like most computer things, it's a tool. If you start using it as it's telling you how to write, then it's wrong. If you're using it to, like you said, sort of as another eye on your prose, and you as the writer can accept or reject it. Are you a one book person? I know a lot of people I know always have like multiple books going at once.
I've got about a half a dozen going at a time. My wife and I are reading Hilary Mantel, the final one, The Mirror and the Light, where it's kind of hard to keep reading because it's going to end badly, and Thomas Cromwell is starting to feel like, hey, this is going to end badly, but he's still thinking about maybe I should get married, even though I know it's going to end badly. I'm just about to start Ligatti's My Work Is Not Yet Done. I've written a few stories set in the business culture with violence or bad things happening, and I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, so what are you working on now? What is your writing projects that are underway?
Short fiction. I've been staying in short fiction. About a year ago, I finished a novel that it's sitting there in abeyance at the moment, and I will approach it and try to edit it at some point. But
all right, so I'd like to do a lightning round where I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, and just sort of try to give me whatever first pops into your head. Let's see how that goes. What is your favorite book?
Favorite book? All right. Trilogy, Lord of the Rings.
Okay. Solid. I'm reading The Lord of the Rings to my son out loud for the first time, and he is enjoying it. Taking a very long time.
Been there, done that. Sorry.
What is your favorite band?
The Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra.
You have kids; they're older now. But what was your favorite book to read out loud to them when they were young?
I think that it was The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. I mean, Gollum's voice—that's a killer. You got to pay overtime if you expect somebody to read Gollum for you. Yeah, that had my daughter, who we thought was a little too young to be hearing The Lord of the Rings. She would creep in the hallway and creep up to the door of my son's room to listen while I was reading it to him. See,
what's your favorite takeout dish?
Takeout dish? I am kind of partial to fish fry. Yeah, had a few of those over the pandemic year.
I don't know if this will work because you said you were forbidden comics at a young age, but Marvel or DC?
Oh, gosh. I mean, Dark Horse?
Okay. Oh, nice. We have a third choice. Fantastic.
All right. Very good.
Waffles or pancakes?
Waffles.
Whiskey or beer?
Oh, I like sissy drinks. I'd say some beers, yeah.
Okay. Do aliens exist as a sci-fi writer?
Odds are they going to pay attention to us? Not.
And will humanity be around in 100 years?
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
come on. We're the cockroaches of the sentient species of the universe. They're going to be around.
The Earth can't kill us even if it's trying. All right, and there appears to be a question that's been added to my question. What has brought you more personal satisfaction, being rich or good looking?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Chris, because I meant to ask my wife first what her opinion should be. But, you know, you have to look beyond these things as material possessions and think about, what's really rewarding is what you've read and what's stayed with you, I think.
Glad you've managed to stay humble. You haven't let the riches and good looks get in your way.
No,
I appreciate that.
Still devoted to knowledge. Yeah.
All right, I need to be careful about letting people edit the question. That was great. I was skimming down and I was like, what? It's like, oh, that's fantastic.
And to see if you'd notice or if you just blurt it out and say,
All right, so we're going to wrap things up. So before I do that, though, I'd like to close on some sort of endorsement. I steal this right from, there's a podcast, Pop Culture Happy Hour, where they end with what's making them happy each week. Is there some music, TV show, video game, something you're reading that you could recommend?
Oh, gosh. Well, I like to think there are these hidden treasures of the 20th century. People like Graham Greene, Josephine Tay, Walker Percy. Pick up one of these people that, 50 years old. I'm not going to read that. Be surprised what these folks were doing, Yeah, show some love to your elders.
Good. I love reading a classic, which I should have read for years, and then I read it and I'm like, there's a reason everyone told me this was fantastic.
And it's like a hidden mine that you've just discovered, and you realize, and this person wrote another half a dozen books that I can delve into when I get the time. Yes.
Yeah, you get some Graham Greene, someone like that could keep you busy for a very long time once you find them. So, all right. So before we wrap up, do you have a website? Anything you want to pitch?
I've got something. One of my stories coming on Creepy Podcast. Only it's in the queue somewhere, and they've paid. So come on, guys. Get the reading done. Alternate Earths 3 is coming out in September with one of the stories I had the most fun with, called Not My Monkey. It's an alternate Earth story set in a world with cortical transplants and panhumans, and it's noir and guns blazing and all that. So look for that.
That's fun.
And of course, buy some Loathsome Voyages and enjoy some weird stuff.
All right, so that's it for now. Again, my guest today was Jim Royce, who publishes as J.L. Royce. You can see, I'm going to get some links maybe for that podcast and the story that's coming out, and I might put those in the show notes if Jim emails them to me. But you can find his writing in Loathsome Voyages, which you can get at Skullgate Media's website, skullgatemedia.com, as well as our other books. You can also find it at Smashwords, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or support your local bookstore and ask them to order a copy for you. If you are a writer, we're currently in the midst of finishing up Volume 3 of Tales from the Year Between, but we'll be recruiting for Volume 4 in the fall. If you'd like to join us in creating a new world, see the application guidelines at yearbetween.com and sign up for our newsletter so you don't miss our submissions window. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and our podcast of the same name, Sounds of the Year Between, or wherever you find your audio addictions. Follow us on Twitter at Skullgate Media. So, Jim, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you, Chris, and stay crazy, people.
All right. Yep, read all the weird stuff, and we'll keep making it for you. All right. Bye, Jim.
I'd like to introduce you to Creative Project Hypersleep, a new series that we're launching here at Sounds from the Year Between. For every story you read, for every song you listen to, for every game you play, there are dozens, if not hundreds, that never see the light of day because they're abandoned. My computer has folders that are filled with novels, short stories, and board game ideas that I started, but for one reason or other haven't finished. And I know that every other creator out there can say the same. I'm interested in these creative dead ends, each of which began as a passion project, some spark that flared before briefly fading away. What inspired their creation, and what led to them being shelved in favor of that novel or painting or album that artist eventually completed? Some of them are truly dead, but many, if not most, are in some artistic limbo, stored in a creative cryogenic deep sleep waiting to be reawakened. In each episode of Creative Project Hypersleep, an artist digs into their creative closet to unearth a project that they've abandoned. Some of the projects have been truly abandoned, while others have just been set aside until the time is right to work on them again. But I suspect there's as much to learn from these creative dead ends as from their finished counterparts. Maybe even more. I've lined up a fantastic group of writers and other creative types, and I hope you'll join us as they share their projects that have fallen to the wayside.